Wisp Sports Radio, the voice of women in sport.
Hello, and thank you for downloading the Amazons podcast here at Wisp Sports. This is Season 2, Episode 2, and I'm Chris Stafford.
I was like, okay, well, now it's time for me to actually try 8A grade. And I did, and I tried, and it took me, I think, a whole week or so, constantly just trying one route, and then eventually I got it, I climbed it clean. And it was a huge satisfaction for me, just a huge turning point for me to realize what I'm actually capable of doing. Because it means if I can climb that, I can push my boundaries even further.
On this episode, we're going to be talking about climbing. But first of all, a word from our sponsors. Dive into summer and enjoy it to the fullest. Cheer on your family Olympians and keep the members of your team diving, swimming, and just having summer fun with Highlands Earache Drops. Highlands wants to make sure your summer fun isn't ruined by ear pain. Highlands Earache Drops provide natural relief from pain, fever, irritability, and occasional sleeplessness associated with earaches. Highlands has been trusted by generations to provide safe homeopathic medicines for everyone in your family. After you've been diagnosed by a physician, try Highlands homeopathic earache drops or tablets. Earache drops are available at CVS stores. To learn more, go to highlands.com/ear. That's HYLANDS, highlands.com/ear. Claims are based on traditional homeopathic medicine, not accepted medical evidence, not FDA evaluated. Always read and follow label directions. My guest is 30-year-old Anastasija Strizakova, who was born in Latvia, but she moved to Ireland when she was a teenager. And it wasn't so long ago that she discovered the sport of climbing, which has changed her life. And as she explains, she used to be shy and introverted, but climbing has brought out a new passion, a new confidence, and new ambitions. Hi, Anastasia. Welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Hi, how are you? Thank you so much for having me.
I found you on Instagram.
Yeah.
And I was so impressed with the photo selection that you had on Instagram. And I thought, this woman means business when it comes to climbing. And there's some really lovely photos of you in different countries where you've taken up what is actually a new passion for you. So let's start at where this passion actually began and why.
Yeah, sure. So I think it was about 6 years ago, so 2014, if I recall correctly. One weekend, I wasn't sure what to do. I was sort of looking for things to do for the weekend, and I Googled things to do in Dublin, because I live in Dublin, and rock climbing popped up. And I had no idea what it is, actually. So I started looking into it, and I said, you know what, let me try. So I signed up for a course for like a day training course just to see what it's like and what it is. And then ever since then, I kind of, started going back to it. I wanted to do it more and more. And then eventually I just fell in love with it. So right now I basically can't live with it, which is great.
It's wonderful to find that passion, isn't it? And something, it's like a drug when you find a sport that you just want to keep doing, just can't wait to get back out there.
I know, totally. And especially for me, because of, I suppose, how I was before I found rock climbing. I didn't really have any hobbies. I didn't have any passions. I had a pretty simple life. I wasn't really doing much except for meeting people, for coffees and going shopping and doing this and that. I suppose I sort of was searching for something to do, or something to call mine, or to have something, a passion in my life, or like a meaning in life. But I just could never find it. I could never see it. I just didn't know it was there. So when I found rock climbing, even though I wasn't great at it initially, I was trying my best, but I wasn't great at it. But it was so appealing to me, just the challenge, mentally and physically, to to the top of a route, it sort of caught me. And I was like, okay, I want to try this again and again and again. I want to come back. I want to see what it's going to do to me. And it's totally changed my life. I mean, looking back, I used to be a totally different person, which is great. It's like I don't really know how to thank to thank myself, I suppose, for Googling that day and finding this thing, because right now, 6 years later, I'm very grateful to have it in my life.
Were you not sort of sporty as a child then, Anastasia, in school and stuff?
I was sporty. I was actually sort of a tomboy sort of girl. Like, I was very sporty. I was always out. I liked adventures. And I've tried different sports before. I tried volleyball, kite surfing, I don't know, even dancing, and all sorts of things I've tried. But I suppose maybe because I was sort of an introvert, I was quite shy. And if I tried something before and I wasn't good at it straight away, I would get really embarrassed. So I'd quit like immediately. So that, I suppose, that kind of prevented me from maybe finding something earlier, if that makes sense. But with rock climbing, I decided, even though I knew I wasn't great at the beginning, I said, I'll stick with it anyway. I just wanted, I don't know what changed in my mind, but I said, I'll stick with it and I'll see where it takes me. And it has taken me quite far in my life, and I'm grateful.
Yes, in many ways it's taken you far and enabled you to grow in very different directions, hasn't it? Now, you are based in Ireland now. You live in Ireland, have been there for a while, but you grew up in Latvia. And I'm one of all the countries that you've climbed in. Are there opportunities to go back there and climb?
No, not in Latvia. It's a pretty flat country. The highest point in Latvia is about 315 meters, which is, wow, I suppose, a hill, but we call it a mountain. We're very proud of it. So no, that we don't have any cliffs or anything like that. And I suppose rock climbing isn't really that popular in Latvia, even from like a rock climbing gym perspective. I think there's maybe like only one in the capital, and it's also not like a great one. So I'd say people wouldn't be familiar with that sport at all back home.
Well, you've adapted to an Irish accent, which tells us how long you've been in Ireland. But what was it like growing up in Latvia?
In Latvia, it was pretty sort of easy life, because I come from a small village, a very, very small village, like one school, one police station, a few shops, and then, just beautiful nature around. We had a lot of forests, and we had a river and lakes. So it was pretty sort of simple life growing up. Interestingly enough, I don't really remember much from my childhood, and I don't know why that is.
So how old were you then when you moved to Ireland?
I was 16 when I moved to Ireland. So I finished my junior cert in Latvia, and then I moved straight here.
And explain why you made that move with your family.
Well, I suppose it's one of the classic Eastern European stories where at that time, 2004, 2005 and 6, I suppose the economies here in Ireland and England were booming. So a lot of Eastern Europeans would have traveled for some time, or maybe just moved permanently to live there to get better jobs and to get basically better financial stability. So my mother saw an opportunity in Ireland, and she moved first herself. And then after a year, she decided that she wanted me to come with her because she believed that I would get better education in Ireland, which she was right, because if you get an education in Latvia, usually it's not internationally recognized. So I suppose that was a good move on her side, and I'm very grateful to her for that. So yeah, basically that's it.
That's the reason why. Now, obviously you love it there and you've settled down and you've got a lot of climbing opportunities there now. So talk about what those opportunities look like. How far do you go for climbing, and how much do you train indoors or on a wall, as opposed to going and finding places on location in Ireland?
So I live in Dublin, so the closest place to go would be a place called Dalkey Quarry. So it's about, depending where you live in Dublin, it's about maybe 30 minutes to 1 hour drive. So that's where I would go, let's say after work. If I work full time, I would go after work if the weather allows and spend my time there. And then off season during the winter times, when it's raining, I would go indoors. So we have a few gyms around Dublin, climbing gyms, where I would spend my time training, climbing, and just trying to get stronger.
So most days you're going climbing, then doing something as much as possible, then to get fitter and stronger.
As much as possible, pretty much, yes. So again, obviously my body needs some rest as well, but I would try to climb anywhere between 4 and 5 days a week, and that allows me to have 2 to 3 rest days a week.
And how long would you go out for then? Say you're outdoors on a climb. How long would you actually be climbing? Because we've talked before, Anastasija, about the preparation and the mental training and the strategy of a climb. Give us an idea what that might look like.
So it can basically be anywhere between 2 hours to a full day of 7-8 hours. So let's say if I'm going after work, I only have the evenings. So depending how much daylight we have, I can have 2 to 4 hours maybe. So if I go out, I always make sure that I have a plan in my head as to what I want to climb so that I'm efficient. And so on the weekends, let's say if I go out, we have a full day. We can easily go there at like 10 a.m. in the morning and come back home at 10 p.m., if not even later. We just like being out all day and climbing. And apart from climbing, you always meet your friends, your climbing partners. So you just have a great time just kind of catching up and socializing. But I find it very important to sort of have a goal in mind before going out climbing, because otherwise I find myself being inefficient or sort of not doing anything and just sitting around and talking to people. That has happened a lot. So I've learned the lessons. If I do want to get something out of it, I have to go in with a plan in my head, and it's worked pretty well ever since I realized that. That's pretty much it.
So when you say that plan, would that be the route, or would that be how high you're going to climb? Is this height important?
No. So if you have, usually it's not height important, because you just have a crag and there's different routes. So it would be grade dependent. So how difficult the climb is. So I might go out one day and have a plan in mind that I want to do easy routes today, but I want to do a lot of easy routes. So sort of I'm not working on my strength, but I'm working on my endurance, let's say, or just basic climbing technique and that kind of thing. Or some days I would have goals in my head that, okay, I want to do specific hard routes. So I would call them my projects. And I know that they're much harder, so I can't do a lot of them. So I pick 1 or 2 or 3 and specifically focus on those. And my goal would be to do all 3 of them or all 2 of them within that evening or within a specific period of time. So if I do achieve that, then I suppose I've succeeded.
Now, you mentioned that the socialization of the sport, and I think that happens in every sport. You form a group, or you have a training partner, or whatever it may be. I mean, it's as social as anything. Now, with climbing, one assumes that you wouldn't climb alone. Presumably, you have someone there for safety measures.
Yeah, so most of the times you would have a partner, so a belayer, a climbing partner. And it can be anyone basically that you know or that you trust, or I suppose it depends on each individual. So I would have a few friends that I climb consistently with. So we would just, if anyone's around the quarry or you arrange before, just to know that you will have someone to climb with. And then you go and you have fun. Or if you are in a group of people, then you just go in and then you just sort of split up. And based on what other people want to climb, you sort of try and arrange sort of good pairs, what would make more sense to go and climb with a specific partner that day. But a lot of people also would go alone, but it would be for the discipline that's called bouldering. So when you boulder, you don't really go high, you're quite low off the ground, and you have crash pads for landing. So you can do that as well in many locations, and you can just have a really good day just on your own, bouldering around, and it's pretty safe.
Explain what bouldering is.
So bouldering is when you are climbing sort of a boulder, so a rock, a big boulder or a big rock, and you don't need rope protections or anything like that because it's generally not high. It could be maybe up to 3 meters or so. And you just climb up, and when you top out, you either down climb the rock from the other side, or there's always a way to kind of get down from the rock. So that's what's called bouldering, if that makes sense.
And without ropes, and then the purpose of that would be what if it's not high off the ground?
Well, usually bouldering is much more difficult in style, so there's less moves, but they're much harder moves, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I get you. And then you said there are landing pads there in case you do fall?
Yeah, so they're called crash pads, bouldering pads. There's several names for that. And you just sort of place them at the bottom of the boulder. And as you climb up, and if you fall, you basically land on the crash pad. So they're soft. So they're designed for that.
I'd imagine that's quite social then, that in itself. That would be quite fun.
Very social. So bouldering would be even more social than rope climbing, let's say. But usually, I mean, there's a lot of people who do it on their own because you could be pretty safe depending on the area. But most of the time, people have friends around, and then you just climb all day, and it's extremely fun.
What's the highest you've climbed, Anastasija?
The highest I've climbed was probably over 100 meters, 120, maybe 130 meters. Cliffs, if I recall correctly, yeah.
And where was that?
That would have been in Verdun Gorge in France.
Where they have some wonderful climbing, so I'm told. Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful, beautiful climbing. So these routes would be called, or these areas would be called multi-pitch routes or multi-pitch climbing, meaning that the climb has multiple pitches because the rock faces are longer, so they're over 100 meters. So it's not just you don't start at the bottom and one person just keeps climbing to the very top. You sort of alternate the leads, if that makes sense. So the whole face is split in sections, and then one person leads the first section, then the second person leads the second section, and then that's how you progress to the top. And
I'm guessing that there are climbs that are there to be, challenged all over the world. Talk about some of those that you've climbed in different countries and what the challenge was. What was the satisfaction of the climb?
I suppose I have to pick a route. I suppose a climb. It would have to be my recent trip to Spain over the winter, when I decided to basically constantly aim for higher and higher grades that I've never climbed before. And so last year I actually climbed my first 8A grade, which was a huge achievement for me. And when we started the trip, I never even thought about even trying something like that. But throughout the trip, I sort of realized that I could, climb harder and harder and harder. And when I reached that last limit, I was like, okay, well, now it's time for me to actually try 8A grade. And I did, and I tried, and it took me, I think, a whole week or so, constantly just trying one route. And then eventually I got it. I climbed it clean. And it was a huge satisfaction for me, just a huge turning point for me to realize what I'm actually capable of doing. Because it means if I can climb that, I can push my boundaries even further, if that makes sense.
Yeah. What are the grades then of these climbs?
So you can look at them as from anywhere from 4 to 9. Let's say we can break it down that way. And then every sort of number grade has a subgrade like 4A, 4B, 4C. And so I've climbed during my Spain trip, I've climbed all the way up until 7C plus. You add a plus as well, 7C plus, and then after 7C plus, the next is 8A, and then you have 8A plus. and so on.
And the highest would be what?
I think the highest in the world right now is 9, I want to say 9C, but maybe I'm lying, 9B plus or 9C.
Okay.
Because every day, there's every day professional rock climbers, they're basically trying harder and harder routes, and there's someone out there that, climbs something, and maybe the only person who has climbed one specific route, and he claims it to be the hardest route in the world, and then it's sort of hard to judge until there's someone else that can come in, try the route, and also say, okay, I agree with you, it's that same grade, or say, actually, I disagree, I think it's easier or even harder. So it's a bit it's tricky in the way that how it's graded, that it's basically based on the climber itself.
Yes, I can see that, how, and that will happen as you discover new climbs all over the world. And do you have then a bucket list then, Anastasija? Do you have some out there as soon as you can get out traveling again that, are on your list?
I have a bucket list for Ireland, definitely. And I have a few, I call them unfinished businesses back in Spain. So if I do go back there, I know exactly what I want to try for sure. But for the time being, with the whole, COVID-19 and the travel restrictions, we don't really know when we can travel back to Spain or anywhere else, I suppose. So at the moment, I'm happy to just focus on the routes in Ireland, which are also pretty fun and exciting.
And what is also fun is that you're getting more and more ambitious with the confidence that you build every time you go out, I guess.
Definitely, yeah. The more sort of the more achievements or the more routes you climb or new boundaries, if you push your boundaries and you achieve something personally for yourself that's difficult, not necessarily for other people, but for myself, if I've seen that something has been very difficult for me in the past and I managed to do it suddenly, that it just gives me a lot of confidence in myself, a lot of self-belief that I can actually, if I can do that, I know I can do more. And it just gives me a lot of motivation to continue training and to continue just keep ticking off those goals off my list. Yeah.
And how do you overcome the nerves? For someone who doesn't do well with heights, I can't imagine doing what you do. And so it would be facing the fear as well, and the challenge of overcoming that apprehension, the excitement, the apprehension, the mental challenge as well. But the fear must be real when you face those climbs sometimes.
Oh, it's definitely real. And for me, I don't really know if it's the heights that I fear. It's more the potential of falling. But if when you're climbing and there's a potential to fall, that's what I fear most, and that's what a lot of the climbers fear. It's like one of the number one fears that every climber will talk about. It's the falling. And I've learned over time, over these 6 years that I've climbed, is that I will actually never get rid of that fear. I believe it's impossible, but there is definitely ways to suppress it or to, I suppose, learn how to control it or manage it. And I've done that throughout my climbing experience. I've seen that I can basically calm myself down by doing certain things before climbing a route. And it's definitely helped me progress for sure.
And I would imagine it's all in that preparation, isn't it? Just before you go, you make sure, you've checked every box in preparation for that. And that kind of focus will, just take your mind, I suppose, consciously for a while off the fear, because, you're doing everything you can to prepare for that climb.
Exactly, definitely. So for me, it would be extremely important to double check that all the logistics, all the climbing equipment is perfectly and correct before I start climbing. You check your partner, you check yourself, you make sure you have everything you need for the climb, so that you're not halfway up and realize that you actually are missing some crucial piece of gear or something else. Make sure that you have your helmet on, that the ropes are in good condition, that everything is in good condition. Basically, that's important for me anyway, to know that everything is working properly, so then I don't have to think about it while I'm climbing. Mm-hmm. And also the mental preparation. So when I approach a climb, if it's a difficult climb for me, I do a lot of preparation beforehand, sort of trying to learn the route, trying to understand where the fall potential could be, where are the most difficult sections, and sort of assessing if I do fall at that point, how bad the fall will be. Most of the time it's fine. And if you do think that there's a potential for some sort of injury, you make sure that, I make sure that I just either practice that specific section beforehand many times just to make sure that I definitely wouldn't fall. So I'm comfortable with that specific move. And then I'm sort of confident to go in and climb the route knowing that I know how to do the specific move. I know I can't fall here. And so you just sort of focus on that. That's your goal in mind. Just climb the route. You know exactly what to do. So just execute it. And a lot of self-talk for me, even before and even during the climb. I would talk to myself in my head, sort of calm myself down and sort of tell myself positive affirmations, if that makes sense. So like, it's, you got this, you can do this, you're strong enough, you're well able for this, you need everything, you have to finish this route, you totally have it. And even when I remember in Spain specifically, when I was sort of trying harder and harder routes, there would be moments when I'd be so tired from the route, so exhausted, but I would talk to myself out loud to say, do not dare to fall here, do not dare to fall here, you have to climb this cliff. And I do it, and then I start laughing to myself because it's like, I feel like it's someone, kind of like a different person just climbed out of my body and started talking to me like, don't you dare fall here, you got this, go ahead. And it's so funny, but it works. For me, that's exactly what it works. When I talk to myself and I tell myself that you can do this, so just do it. So yeah, it's worked for me. So I don't know. I continue to do that.
Yeah, I'm with you. That happens to me. So I know exactly what you mean. And it just keeps you motivated on those sporting challenges, whatever they may be. So when it comes to the sport, if anyone's listening and thinking they might like to take this up, then Anastasia, the costs, presume, obviously, all in the equipment. Do you have to be a member of a club, or what's the structure for climbing?
I suppose it depends what country you're in. Maybe there's different rules in different countries. I'm not sure. But in Ireland, you don't have to be really a member of any club. You can buy your own equipment. You can do some introductory courses in climbing gyms, or if you can find people online or somewhere there's certain, groups on social media, Facebook, Instagram, where people are always looking for people to climb with, or like beginner climbing groups. You just sort of meet up and you start climbing together. So you don't have to be a member of any group, but you can be if you want. There's different associations and organizations where you can sign up, and then you're sort of in a way guaranteed a climbing partner. But otherwise, like me, I just went and did this course, I remember, in Asamoah, and then I got my own equipment and sort of started doing my own thing, started climbing by myself, and then I met people in the gym. I made new friends, and that's how I sort of started progressing and climbing.
And how much does the equipment roughly cost, to get just a basic starter kit, so to speak?
Well, in Ireland, you could get, it depends what type of discipline you want to do, but let's say with the rope climbing, you'd maybe get a rope for like €100, your harness for maybe 60, shoes for maybe 100, and then a chalk bag maybe for €10, and some chalk, let's say another €10. A helmet, €40. Like, it depends what brand. So what's that? Maybe about €300, maybe more, including belay devices and stuff like that. So for the very basic indoor climbing, maybe €300 to €400, I suppose. That's like roughly. I don't really know. I mean, you'd have to go into more detail.
For everybody to do your own research, but that's just a ballpark figure there to get started.
Yeah, obviously, you can save money by, looking online for discounts or knowing exactly where to look. Right.
And then getting some help, some coaching, some training for this. Because we had talked before, Anastasia, and you mentioned that you're going to go further and get coaching qualifications as well to be an instructor.
Yeah, so I will do that in July. So that's my plan because I don't have any and I would like to get one. It's a 3-day training course, and then you basically go away and you climb as much as possible and you log your climbs. And then when you're ready, you can book an assessment course. So basically there's instructors that assess your skills. They basically confirm whether you're good enough or not good enough to get that qualification.
And everybody should look for some help then to get started. I'm not, even if you're climbing with someone who's experienced, is that enough, or do you need real instruction like you would in any sport, really, just to get started?
Yeah. So just to get started, I suppose you don't really. It depends what you're trying to get out of it, but you can always do a 1-day sort of introductory course to basically learn the basics of frog climbing. And then if you want to learn everything inside out, you can do any of these training courses, the more in-depth ones. But generally what happens is people just meet other people and they just learn from other people. You just learn by doing, is what I've seen for myself anyway. That's what I did, and for most of my friends, that would be their stories. So yeah.
And learn safe practices. That has to be the priority, I'm sure, on every time you go out.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah,
definitely.
Well, it sounds like you're having a lot of fun out there, and a lot more to come. Hopefully you'll be able to travel again soon, Anastasia, and take on some of those challenges on your bucket list.
I hope so too. I honestly can't wait to go back there. Out there.
Well, good for you. You have got the bug thoroughly now. That's wonderful. And obviously you can just keep going, no pun intended, but higher and higher in the sport, once you get coaching qualifications, and there'll be no stopping you. So you could make a living. Is that the hope? Then eventually you could have a job doing this? That's
a plan of mine, yes. I don't really want to talk about it too much now, but I do have, I suppose, a project of mine in my head that I'm working on at the moment. So yeah, fingers crossed it works out.
Well done. Well, good for you. The very, very best of luck. And tell everybody how they can find you and those wonderful pictures on Instagram.
Yeah, so my nickname on Instagram is @Nastja, which is Naskja. And that's me. My name's Anastasia. Nastja is my nickname, and that's how you can find me.
That's how you can find it. Okay, we'll also pronounce your last name because you can do it better than I can, obviously.
Yeah, so it's Anastasija Strizakova.
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 Well, awesome. Super. Well, Anastasia, thank you so much for coming on the program and telling us about your climbing and this new passion in life. And I want to wish you the very, very best of luck. Continue to enjoy it and stay safe.
Thank you so much. I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you for having me.
And you can find a link to Anastasia's Instagram account in the show notes accompanying this episode. That's, of course, at wispsports.com. You can also follow us on social media at wispsports. And if you have a moment when you're downloading your next podcast, do leave us a review. It makes a big difference to our listing on Apple Podcasts, and it makes it easier for other people to find us. And if you have any suggestions for guests for this or any of our other shows at Wisp Sports, then do drop us a line to info@wispsports.com. We would love to hear from you. And again, thanks to our sponsors, Highlands Earache Drops. You can find them at highlands.com/ear. Until the next time, thank you for listening and helping us turn up the volume on women's sports. Goodbye for now.